Hot take. Super Paper Mario is the best Paper Mario game to speedrun. With tons of cool movement, a surprising amount of tech, and a super active community with tons of helpful guides and resources, this certified Wii classic is a speed game I would recommend to anyone. If any percent wasn't 4 hours long. But fear not, speedrunning isn't always about beating games as fast as possible. Sometimes, a category can just be completing another objective in the game, like the Flipside Pit of 100 Trials. In contrast to any percent, Pit Percent is a much shorter category in which you conquer all 100 rooms of the pit from a fresh save file. When starting out, it's pretty easy to get a time under 2 hours, making it a great beginner category that teaches you a lot about the game. It's a fun grind at first, and Pit Percent races are especially popular within the community. When you're gunning for a world record, however, the run becomes a brutal grind, where losing runs to tough enemies and brutal RNG is all too common. And you slowly, but surely, begin to lose your mind. Ironically enough, in 2017, Pit Percent was an escape from the game's main category, Any Percent, which suffered from having an infamous run-killing trick 14 minutes in, the 1-2 Liferoom jump. To do this trick, you'd collect 50 coins and damage yourself down to 1 HP from the spiny tromps before you reach Yold Town, then buy a Liferoom from the shop. Next is the frame perfect part. You'd time your jump over the gap before the end of the level when the 3D meter is about to run out, so that you take fatal damage in midair. When the Liferoom revives Mario, you have 1 frame to jump or flip back into 2D and clear the rest of the gap. This trick was an SPM runner's prison, and sometimes, top runners would be stuck on the trick for hours on end. It's not surprising that they were getting sick of Liferoom jump. So in 2017, after a Japanese runner and tasser, Kora was the first to run Pit Percent, several others followed suit. It was a far shorter category than Any Percent, and no one wanted to do Liferoom jump, just so runs could actually make it to the pit consistently. By July 2017, Pit Percent was officially added to the Super Paper Mario Speedrun.com leaderboard, and the category was officially born. The run can be split into 2 halves, the pre-pit and the pit itself. As mentioned earlier, this run begins from a fresh save file, where you must get far enough into the story to where you could even enter the pit. Speaking of, what exactly is the pit? For some background, the Pit of 100 Trials was an optional challenge in the Thousand Year Door, Super Paper Mario's predecessor, where you must defeat all enemies on each floor in order to progress, and the enemies generally get tougher the deeper you go. Every 10 floors is a rest area that sometimes has a shop to restock on items, and at the very bottom of the pit, floor 100, you have to defeat a super boss. Super Paper Mario's pits are very similar, but with some notable differences. Instead of needing to defeat all enemies on the floor to reach the next, you have to navigate maze-like rooms filled with enemies, and one of them has the key to the next room. The rooms are procedurally generated, where the block layouts, enemy types, and number of enemies stays the same, but the enemies, keys, and door placements are random, with some rare exceptions. Like the squiglet in room 97 that's always in the upper left corner and is the only enemy in the room, which is just really bizarre. Like, why are you here, alone this deep into the pit? It makes no sense, and I love it. At the end of the pit, in room 100, you fight Racktail, a stronger version of the Chapter 1 boss, Fractail. Defeating him earns you the optional pixel, Dashel, as well as an exit pipe from the pit, which is where time ends for the run. We'll go more in depth about the pit later. After all, there's an entire section of the run leading up to the pit itself. Which begs the question, how soon can you enter the pit? The entrance of the Flipside Pit of 100 Trials is on the outskirts of Flipside, which you normally can't access until after you complete Chapter 1, and after Peach joins your party. Out there is a pipe blocked off by a couple of brick blocks. These can be blown up by Boomer, the explosive pixel you obtain in 2-1. This path leads you above the pit entrance, where you can then hit the switch to enter. So the route was pretty straightforward. You'd play through the beginning of the game basically as intended up until getting Boomer in 2-1. Then, you'd use the return pipe to go back to flip side, enter the pit, and then get to the end as fast as you can. So, what were the first runs of pit percent like? Well, in the summer of 2017, the runs were not very good, as expected from a new category that wasn't super sweaty quite yet. Some of the earliest pit percent record holders included former any percent record holder Mirror A, the previously mentioned Kora, and New Super Mario Bros. Wii runner Green Uprooter. By the end of the year, the record settled around 1 hour and 35 minutes, but the strategies used were fairly basic. However, the importance of grinding points early on was not overlooked. Entering the pit at a high enough level was important, as there were some enemies with high enough defense where you could get soft-locked if you were too low of a level to hurt them. In 1-1, flipping the 3D and jumping consecutively on this throng of squiglets is one of the fastest way to grind points to level up. In this grind, you really want to get the 2 level ups at 10,000 and 20,000 points to increase your HP and attack power respectively. By today's standards, you really want to aim for at least 30,000 points here. In 1-2, runners never went for Liferoom jump, since it cost 50 coins at the shop, which are better spent for buying items from Flim in the pit. Also, don't forget, people started running this category because they needed a break from doing Liferoom jump in any percent. In 1-3, another point grind is done here with the Fast Flower and the Pal Pill. Runners also implemented some neat time savers like the Coconut Jump and Ice Churble Skip. In 1-4, runners also made sure to land back on Fractail each time to avoid having to wait to hop back on each cycle. In the pit itself, some strategies included kicking shelled enemies and flipping into 3D to take out as many in one go without the shell hitting a wall, while giving you the freedom to grab the key if it drops. The over-reliance on Boomer, however, made some of the floors painfully slow. Take floor 19 in Mirror's first run. The Koopa Troll takes forever to kill with Boomer and should have been kept for last. The floor 98 Red Chomps, hoo boy! Using just Boomer again is slow and risky. You'd be better off keeping your distance and using a Thunder Rage or an Ice Storm here to take out at least 3 of them. Item play wasn't very sophisticated yet, but sometimes you'd see Fire Burst used for some rooms with lots of enemies, like floor 89 with the Head Bonk Goombas. But at this point, runners mainly use coins to buy healing items, since the only other way to heal in the pit is by leveling up. This introduces an interesting risk-reward system that makes this run very fascinating to me. How much do you really want to rely on healing items in the run? If you're starting out, you'd be wise to play it safe and stock up on as many Shroom Shakes as possible for safety. Heck, maybe you could take a detour in 1-2 to buy some shakes in advance, since Flim only has a 30% chance to spawn in the rest floors. On the other hand, if you're confident in your gameplay not to get hit too much, you can buy mainly attacking items instead, and rely on level ups and random item drops from enemies for healing. It's a dichotomy that makes this category approachable for newbies so they can finish runs more often, but also rewarding to expert runners who are willing to sacrifice safety for speed. At this point in the timeline, the run was far from optimized, and there was still plenty of work to be done. But then, in 2018, someone would begin to take the pit much more seriously than any competition prior, and he would become the first player to truly dominate the category. But first, I know the holidays are coming up, and you may be worried about losing your wallet or not having enough luggage space, but fear not, Exter is here to the rescue. This video is sponsored by Exter. Now, Exter is known for inventing the first trackable wallet. All you need to do is take this tracker card here, press the button, link it up to the app, and attach it to the back. Now, in case you lose this sleek, slim wallet that carries up to 12 cards, you can easily track it down. Exter also sells these nifty vacuum bags that are a must-have for travelers. It's carry-on size, it'll triple your bag's packing space, comes with a portable USB-C rechargeable air pump, and can compress more than a dozen clothing items per bag. It also doubles as a laundry bag. If these products seem enticing to you, click the link in the description or pinned comment below and use my code LunaticJ to get up to 45% off on these awesome products. Thank you again to Exter for sponsoring today's video. This is Slopdop, and on April 30th, 2018, he would claim his first pit percent world record during a race. And over the summer, he and another runner, NM Flash, developed a bit of a friendly rivalry in this category. While Flash managed to climb to a respectable second place, Slopdop just kept widening that gap between himself and everyone else. And it was clear why: his innovative item usage. In his earlier records, he'd primarily buy fire bursts to use in two places. In Room 21, he'd lure as many Spinies as he could on screen, and then use a fire burst to take them all out. This is much faster than the 2 hits it takes to kill a Spiny with Boomer. During the Racktail fight, it takes 10 hits to the antenna to move on to the next cycle. Normally, you'd use Throw to pick up and toss the Rackles to deal damage. While you could use Peach's Parasol to glide and land on the antenna for the second and third cycles, this first cycle was quite slow with these 10 throws. Slopdop, however, started using 2 fire bursts here to avoid throwing any Rackles, which is faster and more consistent. He also began refining some item strats in other rooms deep into the pit. Room 86 is one of the most dangerous rooms in the pit, home to 4 Magikoopas and 5 Koopa Trolls. Slopdop would prioritize taking out the Magikoopas first, and in case he had a Hot Sauce or a Mighty Tonic, he would use it to take out the Koopa Trolls with 1 Boomer Blast instead of the usual 3. In Room 89, Slopdop would begin to use the Shell Shock he picked up in Bestovius' house in 1-1, instead of using a Fire Burst, which was much better for taking out more of the Goombas, and especially great for grinding more points. The Slopdop era of 2018 and 2019 really highlighted how much potential for optimization there was to be made for the pit itself. And as he approached the 1 hour 30-minute barrier, PBs and world records became much more difficult than the relative Wild West of the category in 2017. This particular milestone was the toughest challenge Slop faced yet, as RNG reared its ugly head. As really favorable key spawns and item drops can bring back a run minutes behind, it can just as easily ruin some amazing paces. Your luck in the pit is both the greatest source of time gain and time loss. Improvisation when the pit throws you unfavorable scenarios, and even when it throws you a bone, is one of the most important skills to have when running this category. Take Room 58 for example. This is a very annoying room with 8 crazy daisies, whose attacks put you to sleep when their singing projectile hits you, and an incredibly elusive and very dangerous Amazy Daisy, which does 10 damage. So you obviously want to take out the crazy daisies first and leave the Amazy for last, because no one likes being Amazy. So, how do you deal with a deadly singing flower that just loves to run away and flip dimensions? Remember Throw? Yeah, that's how. Chuck it into a corner, stomp on it, and try not to die. After several months of runs that fell just short, Slopdop would eventually earn his sub 130 on April 10th, 2019, with a 1:28:31. Having just broken a significant barrier while being 5 minutes ahead of Flash, he was satisfied with his achievement, and this 1:28 remains Slop's PB to this very day. For the rest of the pack to catch up, they would need to start improving their gameplay in the pit. Or perhaps, they would need to start researching for time save elsewhere. Elsewhere being the pre-pit. 2019 was a landmark year for Super Paper Mario speedrunning as a whole. The game itself was becoming more popular, new runners joined the community, and Any% saw some major developments. This increased activity, of course, spilled over into Pit%, with racing especially taking off around this time. In addition, Pit% began to borrow new strategies discovered in Chapter 1. In 1-4, Flash and JCR would find a method to get the second Ruins key early. By crouch jumping out of the quicksand and into this corner, you can clip partially out of bounds into the wall and grab the key without needing to hit the switch in another room, saving 30 seconds. oh look, Mohoc beat Slopdop. This momentum carried on into 2020, which, if you know anything about the any percent history, was the biggest year for SPM yet. In April, JCR would create the SPM community channels on Twitch and YouTube. These channels would be home to various community events, races, and other video projects. What inspired JCR to make these channels, however, was the community's first Pit Percent tournament. The first two tournaments in 2020 were quite small, but reception was very positive. Both participants and spectators had a lot of fun, and soon after, it became an annual event held every summer in the SPM community, with the number of total participants increasing each year. Mohoc, then world record holder, won the first Pit Percent tournament in the spring of 2020. By the summer, a relative newcomer to the game, Teddy Tank, would then dethrone Mohoc as not only the new world record holder, but also the new champion for the second tournament held a few months later. One of Teddy's records in particular stood out, specifically his 1:23:39 set on August 28, 2020, where he went for this. He actually went for the Liferoom jump, the very same trick that drove runners away from any percent towards Pit Percent in the first place. Teddy failed the jump on his first attempt, but luckily he had made a safety save after purchasing the Liferoom, so we could try the trick again. He got it on the second try and still saved over 30 seconds. The run would only beat the previous record by 3 seconds though, and to this day, this is the only Pit Percent record to use Liferoom jump. So, did runners just not bother skipping the green bridge at the end of 1-2 anymore? Well, yeah, but it's kinda complicated. You see, Liferoom jump was not the only way to clear the gap. Back in July 2019, Mohoc found an alternate method for green bridge skip, where you would clip out of bounds in 3D using a sign in the Old Town shop. Then, you navigate in the dark to an invisible geometric plane next to the chasm, and precisely walk up a seam just high enough to where you could jump over the gap. This was considered tasks only for well over a year, until July 13th, 2020, when Glitch Hunter Roblox 8192 investigated the trick further. After some testing, she found a setup that was viable for runs, but still fairly difficult. Her method involved hitting the save block after performing the shop clip, then resetting the game and reloading the save file to make the outside visible again. Then navigate out of bounds to this pipe, line up with it, and do a home menu buffered frame perfect setup to get onto the seam, which is precise to 1/100th of a unit. If done correctly, you can then walk up the plane and clear the gap. This new setup would be quickly implemented in any percent by the top runners, but many were hesitant to go for it in Pit Percent. Castle, however, was not one of those reluctant ones. He was quick to implement the new GBS method into his runs, and on August 13th, 2020, he got on a really good run that was on world record pace heading into the 90s. Unfortunately, the run would begin to take a turn for the worse. Flim spawned in room 90, and Castle bought another Fireburst for Racktail. Ideally, he would have also bought either an Ice Storm or a Thunder Rage here for room 98. But since he had neither, and Flim wasn't selling any, this was bad news, especially since Castle also did not reach 300,000 points yet, a level up threshold for an increased attack boost. This meant that each red chomp takes 4 Boomer Blasts to kill. And of course, the last chomp had the key. Classic Pit moment. The pace was getting a bit shaky before then anyways. Rooms 92 and 93 were both last enemy keys, and he's lucky it wasn't any worse because oh my god, screw these guys! Ninjos, as well as their more difficult variants, Ninjons and Ninjeris, are some of the most annoying enemies in the pit, with their jumping, their shurikens, their evasiveness, but worst of all, sometimes, when you're about to stomp on one, they vanish and drop a bomb, and they don't reappear until after it explodes. Easily one of the most trollish enemies in the pit. After Teddy's record with Liferoom jump, the record stood strong for 9 months, the longest a pit percent record had lasted so far. That didn't mean there wasn't any new developments in the meantime. On September 23rd, 2020, igrmi, a top Japanese runner, found a faster way to enter the pit. By taking the elevators directly down to the closed pit entrance on basement 2 of Flipside, you could then place down Boomer, switch to throw, and then pick up Boomer and precisely throw the bomb to hit the switch above. It's a tight throw that's barely possible, but if done quickly, saves 30 seconds over going the intended path to the switch. On May 25th, 2021, Zimbo found that instead of standing on the blue pedestal and pressing minus and 1 simultaneously to reveal the end of level star block, you could instead hop on a small invisible seam to the right of the statue while walking forward in 3D. Then you could hit the star block after flipping back to 2D. A cute little 15-second time save. More importantly, a new runner was quickly climbing up the ranks, and unlike many before them, this guy was a pit percent specialist. Meet Shigemura. Shigemura was an SPM runner who exclusively ran pit percent. After submitting his first runs in October 2020, he climbed the ranks incredibly fast, implementing the new strats along the way, minus GBS. His grind would pay off on June 6, 2021, when he finally beat Teddy by 10 seconds with a 1:23.29. This record stood for 5 months, and a whole year had passed without a new minute barrier being broken. An absolutely ridiculous statistic, considering the RNG heavy nature of pit percent. Was the run finally becoming very optimized? Considering the lack of GBS, no, it wasn't. Also, whoa, check this out! This is a Super Boomer, a gnarly strat where if you place down Boomer in 3D and then time flipping back to 2D right when he's about to explode, you can take out an entire line of enemies. Awesome. On November 4th, 2021, another newcomer, Stevie Bats, would beat Shigemura's record by 3 seconds, and he would use the new Super Boomer strat in room 95 to clear out a bunch of the Skelobits at the bottom, and I really want to believe he clutched this record because of that. But as inspirational as Stevie's rise to the top of pit percent is, Shigemura wasn't going down without a fight. Just 2 weeks later, on November 16th, he would set this historic run. Shigimura's 120-50 was, quite frankly, ahead of its time. The use of GBS in an era where runners didn't need to do it for world record, the confidence in his movement, the luck, the strats. It was an earth-shattering record in SPM history, one that was gonna last for quite a while. Aside from failing a pretty difficult and ambitious strategy to get on Racktail's antenna, there aren't really many noticeable flaws with this run. It's just a shame that as quickly as Shigemura appeared on the scene, he quickly vanished, and hasn't returned since. The record stood for well over a year. GBS was a very reset-heavy trick so early onto the run, and it had its inconsistencies with one of the frame-perfect inputs the setup used. This frustrated many runners, and was by far the biggest deterrent for anyone willing to challenge the record. The year is now 2023. Pit percent is still a popular racing category. Castle and Teddy have been inching closer to the top, but are still quite far. It seemed like yet another year would pass with an inactive Shigemura atop the pit percent throne. However, in the early hours of January 9th, igrmi dropped a bombshell, a new, much simpler method for GBS. It no longer required reloading your save, and only had one instance of home menu buffering, and the inputs were far more lenient with no random elements. It was a miracle, and absolutely reignited competition at the top level. Within days, Castle would be the one to finally break Shigemura's year-long record. Stevie would follow suit a month later. Both runners were now closing in on a new 10-minute barrier, the sub 120. By the fall of 2023, the top of the pit percent leaderboard remained mostly stagnant. Despite their best efforts, neither Castle nor Stevie were able to improve upon their PBs set earlier in the year. Sub 120 had to be one of the most painful grinds any runner of pit percent could possibly go through. It was dead run after dead run, heartbreak after heartbreak. It was enough to drive you mad.
And I crashed. Damn.
No, I came back in bounds. Frick!
Oh no.
Oh my god, I grabbed the slow flower. I thought that was a f***ing coin flower. I'm such a f***ing idiot. Oh my god, I sucked.
That was depressing. Yo, so play Valorant. I'm playing Valorant because I'm f***ing sad. I need to shoot some people in the head after that. That was some bullshit.
What the f*** is wrong with me? I thought I reached the trigger point and I was just f***ing standing there. I'm so f***ing stupid.
Frick!
I think every soft drink and
This f***ing game f***ing blows, dude. Oh great, I died. Anyways. Oh, that was fun.
There was a glimmer of hope, however, as that very same summer, another runner would finally learn GBS and quickly rise up the pit percent ranks. Only this time, it wasn't a relative newcomer, but rather someone who had been around for quite a while already. Kora. The remainder of 2023 was a hard grind for the top runners. After several months of grinding, on December 15th, Kora, now sitting in second place 3 seconds behind Stevie, was on a great pace into the pit. And he was on fire. He was playing incredibly well, and got very good key RNG. He unfortunately got Koopa trolled in room 19, and didn't have a fire burst for room 21. But even if it cost some time save, there was no slowing Kora down. The great key drops just kept on coming. A lucky shroom shake and a fire burst drop in room 41. An epic super boomer to wipe out the curses of room 73. Nothing was gonna slow him down except room 98. No Thunder Rage, no Ice Storm, under 300,000 points, and the last chomp had the key. The sub 120 pace was now in jeopardy. Kora was at least fortunate enough to have 2 fire bursts for Racktail, but it was now or never.
I'm on world record pace. That was last key and I'm still... Oh my god! Please! Oh my god. We're on 119 pace. Holy f... Oh my god! What the f... I haven't even ran this category in 2 weeks. Holy sh... I did it! Yes! Oh my god! I f***ing did it! Yes! I can finally stop playing this stupid category!
And with that, Kora had broken the toughest milestone Pit Percent had seen yet. With this accomplishment, the end of 2023 marks the end of this era of Pit Percent, although no one quite realized it yet. Then again, no one could have predicted that in 2024, a massive discovery was about to change Pit Percent forever. Let's revisit the pit entrance. We've gone over the 2 ways you could enter the flipside pit: the intended route via flipside's outskirts, and the boomer throw above the pit entrance. Both methods require boomer to enter. Or do they? Let's dial the clock back a few years to October 2nd, 2019. While messing around with 3D coordinates, NM Flash went to the blocked off pipe to the pit. He then stood next to the pipe, and then performed a Liferoom jump to flip back into 2D while in mid-air. This clipped him into the blocks, and he was able to take the pipe down. A month later, Mohoc found an easier method to get into the pipe early via a precise corner clip. Thanks to these finds, it was now possible to enter the pit without Boomer and without entering Chapter 2. So why did nobody do this in runs? For starters, the flipside outskirts are locked behind a gate. After completing Chapter 1 in Awakening Peach, Merlon will give you the key to unlock the gate. This is already a half an hour into the run, and since Boomer is within the first level of Chapter 2, there just wasn't a point to skipping him when you unlock him so close to the earliest point you could enter the pit. Second, even if it was somehow faster, that doesn't change the fact that Boomer is the bread and butter of Pit Percent. Whether it be taking out a cluster of enemies, dealing with spiked enemies, blowing them up through a wall, Boomer is such a great pixel for the pit that you really take him for granted. Because if you're not prepared, even with the hand you've been dealt, you could easily get soft-locked. Rooms 13, 15, and 84 have Schlurps and Schlorps, enemies that can only be defeated by feeding them Boomer. So what do you do when one of them has the key? Well, as a last resort, you'd have no choice but to despawn them. Using Throw, it is possible to throw them out of bounds, and thanks to a built-in failsafe, the game will spawn in the key if the enemies are all despawned. This despawn strat could be used for the dry bones in room 54 and the dull bones in room 62 if you don't have any fire bursts. Not all enemies are able to be tossed out of bounds though. For room 21, the spiny room, you absolutely need to use a fire burst. Otherwise, use soft lock, since you can't pick up and throw spiked enemies. The chomp rooms 25 and 98 become even more annoying. Since these enemies have absurd defense, you absolutely need to use items like a Thunder Rage, Ice Storm, or a Shell Shock. Otherwise, you're totally screwed. No Boomer makes the pit significantly more difficult, requiring you to stock up on additional items and learn difficult strats in order to finish. Because of this, no one was willing to do a Boomerless Pit Percent run for years. It wouldn't be until January 31st, 2023, when Zacklink99 would become the first person to do a Boomerless run, a 135. Yeah, skipping Boomer just wasn't worth it. Not unless you could enter the pit much earlier. And this might surprise you, but there was a way already. Back in 2021, SPM Tasser and Glitch Hunter John P55 discovered that by using the light prognosticus in Merlon's house, you can clip out of bounds and navigate along the seams of Flipside to clip past the locked gate. This is Merlon House Clip, and it was considered barely TAS only. Yeah, it was that difficult, where even recreating the clip in TAS was horrible. You're basically squeezing Mario in between the wall and the book, and both behave as walls trying to push you out. It wasn't until 2023 when Mohoc started to look into creating an RTA viable setup. The first setup he posted was a bit too complicated for people to try, but when he posted a simpler one he found on February 6, 2024, this was the method that stuck. It was still pretty difficult, especially since you're navigating the dark along a razor-thin seam. But now, Merlon House Clip was RTA viable, and it saved 20 minutes. Within days, igrmi and Kora would set new pit percent records, a 112 and a 110 respectively. Over a week later, however, igrmi would get a pretty solid time of 104.54. igrmi's run was a fantastic showcase of the potential of Boomerless and the route. The run starts off pretty standard with your 1-1 squig grind, but takes a detour in 1-2 to grab more coins. Since you can't rely on Boomer to take out a lot of the problematic enemies I mentioned earlier, it was necessary to grab some extra coins to buy items to prevent any soft locks. 2 fire bursts and 5 shell shocks. In addition to the fire burst and the shell shock from Bestovius' house, igrmi was also lucky enough to get a fire burst drop from one of the squigs. After performing GBS and hitting the star block, you automatically get throw, so it's faster to do GBS and do a small point grind with the fast flower in 1-3 before using the return pipe, rather than just grabbing throw from the chest and then dipping. After warping back, igrmi did Merlon House Clip and then entered the pit. In rooms 13 and 15, they avoided getting schlurped, but got Koopa trolled in room 19. igrmi managed to bait the Koopa troll to the bottom left, however, and used a Koopa to take it out, preserving a shell shock, which was used to take out the room 25 chomp, another key Koopa troll in room 86, and a couple red chomps in 98. Overall, igrmi played the pit very well and got great key RNG. Boomerless had only just become a major time save in pit percent, and there already being a run of this caliber was very impressive. On the other hand, the introduction of the very difficult Merlon House Clip was a massive barrier of entry for anyone who wanted to run the new Boomerless route. One of the biggest appeals of pit percent was that it was a very beginner-friendly category that, while you could become faster at by learning some advanced strats, anyone could finish a run with the classic route. Boomerless kind of went against that philosophy, and with very few runners willing to put up with such an awful trick, something had to change. After weeks of discussion and a community vote, pit percent would eventually be split into 2 subcategories, Classic and Boomerless. There was a short period where there was also a combined all tab, but it was a bit controversial to combine the 2 routes, and was quickly removed. To this day, Classic is still the most popular and competitive version of pit percent, and will likely remain the case forever. Boomerless, however, had its appeal to a select few individuals. One of these runners was quite a fan of the pit, and although they just picked up pit percent at the start of 2024 as a break from any percent, this runner would very quickly become the greatest pit percent specialist the game has ever seen. After a ton of practice, they entered the Classic Pit tournament as the 8th seed, and came out of the bracket as the runner-up. In addition to beating igrmi's Boomerless record, albeit on emulator, they were also the first person to complete a Pixelless pit run, an incredibly difficult challenge run that skips throw and has a slim to none chance of finishing. Heading into 2025, the pit saw a dawn of a new era. or rather in this case, a moonrise. Moonrise had made their mark on pit percent not just with their stellar classic tournament performance and achievements in Boomerless and Pixelless, which was also added to the leaderboard, but they also proved to be an amazing strat finder, especially with enemy despawns in the pit. In November 2024, Moonrise discovered a pretty simple time save in Classic Pit. By walking off the ledge diagonally in 3D and then jumping back into 2D in midair, you could hold down, jump, and do a couple short crouch jumps with some forward momentum to change Mario's Z position while in 2D. This allows you to clip out of bounds into some walls, like in this room in 2-1, where instead of entering this pipe to go into the background to hit a blue switch, you could perform this Z jump to clip into the wall and hit the blue switch while in the foreground. But that wasn't all. On March 21st, 2025, Moonrise discovered Lineland Door Clip. By performing Z jumps on Flipside Tower, it was possible to clip out of bounds using the Chapter 1 door, land on a save block below, and you are now walking along the seams of Flipside, and you can get past the locked gate. Merlon House Clip was officially dead, and with this revolutionary find, Moonrise set their sights on a pit percent milestone no one saw coming: the sub-hour. When they got a new world record of 1:00:41 on April 21st, it was no longer a matter of if sub-hour was possible, but rather when.
1:32. That's not sub-hour. It's not fucking sub-hour. It's like, it never ends. It never ends. Thank you for the GGs.
It happened. Moonrise had skipped the 59 and cemented themselves as the champion of the pit. This was a feat no one in 2017 could have ever seen coming, but it was a culmination of years of hardcore community support, discoveries, and innovations that led to this point. While pit percent to many is a grind that will test your sanity, it makes the satisfaction of every PB, big or small, so sweet. Huge congrats to Moonrise on their sub-hour, both on emulator and on console. Thank you so much for helping me and answering questions while researching this video. I highly recommend watching their 104 Pixelist record as well. It's an incredibly volatile run that only has about a 10% chance of completion. They're one of the only people really pushing the limits of that category, even if it's not as fast or competitive as Boomerless. Links to their channel are down below. Pit percent is a category I learned recently, and I've fallen head over heels for, and it wouldn't have been easy to get into without the amazing resources and tutorials on the SPM community YouTube channel and Discord server. Links to those are also below. I'm also looking to get back into streaming on Twitch, so when this video is up, I may be live doing some pit percent speedruns, so feel free to stop on by and say hi. Shoutouts to JCR for also helping me with research, and Glitch PhD for editing this video. He just put out a massive world record progression on Luigi's Mansion No Out of Bounds speedruns that I highly recommend you check out. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to shoot for the moon. Rise.